Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Todd Latham, and our topic is Addiction Recovery Ministry. Todd, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thank you for having me today.
Todd Latham is pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Russellville, Kentucky, and CEO of Grace Recovery Home, which started in 2014. Drawing from his own past with addiction, Todd is passionate about communicating the gospel to those who feel hopeless and that everything can be restored through Christ. So, Todd, let's jump right into these questions. You are a Christian, you're a pastor of a church, but something happened along your ministry that really changed everything about your family life and your ministry assignment. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Well, I was in my about mid-30s, and I was bivocational pastor, and I was at work, and I picked up some material off a skid that weighed about 40, 50 pounds, and I injured my back, and I went to the doctor. Doctor was very busy. He seen me for about 30 seconds, prescribed me some pain pills. Yeah. Went back for about 6-7 months after that. Same thing, just pain pills every month. And then he cut me off that last month. And next thing you know, I was addicted to pain pills, and never really did drugs as a young man or anything. So my body was feeling something that never felt before, and I knew of how to get a hold of some. And in my mind, I was thinking just enough to get me by the weekend or something. Really didn't think about an addiction or anything. But next thing you know, I went on a 5-year journey of taking 40 to 50 Lortabs a day.
My goodness. And you were still pastoring during that time, most of that time, is that right?
That's correct, yes. I was still pastoring, and it was never an issue of not loving the Lord. I always loved the Lord, but the drugs just totally took over my life.
Todd, at what point did you realize you had a problem that you couldn't overcome by yourself, and did others around you notice what was going on?
Actually, no. I was holding a job. I was married. I was in Bible college, pastoring. Matter of fact, when my wife found out, it shocked her. And I was promoted at work. They would send me on business trips and everything. And I just, when I knew that I had a problem was when I started getting sick and I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I was spending just ridiculous amounts of money to try to get these pills, but I couldn't stop.
How did everything kind of finally come out that you had this addiction? How did it become public?
Well, I just got tired of it.
Yeah.
I hated myself. I hated, because the drugs not only alter our physical how we feel, but it alters our mind. And I started dealing with depression real bad, anxiety, and I just hated looking at myself. And I actually put a gun in my car and was going to go kill myself.
My goodness.
And I thought I didn't want my kids to grow up without their father. And so I finally called my wife and admitted to her that I had a problem and I needed help.
What happened next, Todd, after you told your wife what had been going on and you said she was surprised? What happened after that?
She was very shocked. She checked me into, she called around and she got me into a detox center. And that began my journey of recovery, trying to recover, which I didn't get it the first time. I relapsed about 4 times. And finally, I just surrendered to the program and surrendered, which the program teaches you to surrender to God, and just surrendered myself.
Todd, I read your story. We did an article in Kentucky Today about your work, the work of the church. And I thought I remembered reading in there that you had used alcohol in your younger years and just asked God to take that away from you. And he did, but it didn't happen that way with drugs. Tell us about that experience with relapse. I know lots of folks who are dealing with recovery, it seems to take multiple times to kind of get out of the cycle. What causes the relapse, and what's that experience like?
Well, it's an obsession.
Yeah.
You can feel good. I would be sitting in meetings, and 12-step meetings, and I'd be sitting in meetings, and then somebody would say something, or I drove by somebody, or something remind me of something, and the mental obsession was so powerful that I could actually literally taste the drugs in my mouth.
Goodness.
And that's after being clean for 3 months. And um, so it's the mental obsession that just you start thinking, because there's a lot to drug addictions. It's just not taking something to alter the way you feel. It's the chase. It's the um, trying to find something, and the
Yeah.
reward. It's the reward system is getting altered in your brain. And I would be withdrawing. I would withdraw every 4 hours. So I would take pills, and then 4 hours I would start with the sweats, getting sick, and everything. Every 4 hours.
Wow.
And as soon as I could find something, that withdrawal went away. And because it was a reward system, like I'm on my way to get something that's going to make me feel somewhat normal.
So Todd,
And
what is? I mean, in detox, I guess I assume they're trying to get you out of that cycle of constantly withdrawing and then giving in again. What's that experience like physically, mentally, emotionally when you're going through detox?
it's it's like the worst case of flu, but times that times 10.
Yeah.
It's literally unbearable. The pain, especially different drugs have different withdrawal symptoms, and the opioids that I was on are very painful. You feel pain, you have muscle responses that you can't control. You go through just fever, sickness, sweats, chills, diarrhea. I mean, it runs the whole gamut through
Wow.
your body. Yeah.
So you were pastoring a church, and then you had this experience. Your wife helps you get in detox. How did the church respond when they discovered that their pastor had was addicted to painkillers?
Uh, Actually, I resigned the church as I went into detox.
Okay.
Um, and that's a whole nother going through the detox and the recovery in the beginning, just the shame and the guilt
Yeah.
of, I'm the pastor. I'm supposed to have this image, this
Yep.
I'm a man of God.
Absolutely.
And here's something has taken over, just literally took over my life, and I couldn't do nothing about it,
Yeah.
and or felt I could. And so there was a lot of shame and guilt, and I resigned the church, and uh, spent a good year or so not even going to church because of the shame and the guilt.
So now, fast forward a little bit, you ended up coming back to Grace Baptist just to attend services at first, I understand, and then one day the preacher that was supposed to preach wasn't going to show up. They asked you to preach, and then they kept asking you, and then they called you as pastor. What obstacles were kind of in front of you to becoming pastor again, Todd, of the church?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of them was my own mindset, because I was still dealing heavily with depression. Um, I felt unworthy at times, so I had to go through my own struggles.
Hmm.
Um, and the only reason that, because I had no intention, I was just trying to survive.
Right.
And I had no intention of preaching again, but I was in rehab, and I prayed to God. Here was my prayer. My prayer was, God, you took alcohol away from me. Why can't you take this drug addiction away from me?
Yeah.
And I said, and I said, how can anybody ever trust me, or how can you ever use me again? And it's like a still small voice. I looked down at my Bible. I was in the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 29.
Well,
And it said, the gift and calling of God are without repentance.
mm-hmm.
And I could hear him say, I'm not sorry I called you. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah.
And so so they asked me to preach, and I done it.
Yeah, you're still doing it, Todd. You can understand why some folks in the church were probably skeptical, given the past and the experience of recovery. And how did you cope with that personally, realizing that it's just going to be difficult for some people for you to be pastor of that church?
Yeah, that was another challenge. Is that there was some that was skeptical, some that just is absolutely against it.
Yeah.
And so I, while I was in recovery, and one of the things I've learned in recovery is I've got to do what I can do, and I've got to let God do what He can do. And I prayed about it. I said, God, if this is Your will, you'll let the door be open, and you'll give me peace about it. And I had peace about it, and I knew there would be some struggles there, but I left that in His hands.
What was it like for your family when you were going through all this experience of once it was known that you had this addiction to painkillers? I read that for one time, for a while, you and your wife were homeless. You lost most everything that you had.
Yeah, we lost everything we had. um, I was talking to my youngest son. He's 25 now, and just last week, and he's a worship leader at a church in Bowling Green, and and I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
I've been 12 years. I just celebrated 12 years of recovery just last week,
Yeah, wonderful.
and last week I had a conversation with him, and he talked about it, and I'm looking. And here's the thing: I'm looking at the struggle that I put on my family,
Yeah.
that they're having to deal with my addiction, and not realizing that there was another dynamic that my kids had to deal with, which was the struggle my wife had to go through, of having to watch me go through this, and she feeling helpless, and then their own struggles. So it was, it was very challenging for the family as a whole to just walk through that journey. But we did it, and we just loved on each other during that time.
And now God's turned this into a ministry for you. This whole experience really characterizes your work as a pastor, and now this work that you've started. So, Todd, you've started a ministry called Grace Recovery Home. What is Grace Recovery Home, and how did your experience lead to the launching of this ministry?
Grace Recovery Home is a 12-month faith-based recovery center, where people can come, and we'll house them, and then we will walk them through the first year of recovery. We'll help them with classes, and we have different classes. We have certified alcohol and drug counselors. We have, there's 18, I found out there's 18 peer support specialists that's licensed in the state of Kentucky, and I have 2 of them on my staff.
Wow.
So we work with them through the process of early recovery, getting them back on their feet. And what led me to the ministry was when I became pastor again at Grace, I was doing a ministry in Bowling Green with different halfway houses and things like that. And we had an old church building that we really wasn't even using. And so I come from a business world because my job was in business. And I was like, space equals money in the business world. So I was like, we can utilize that space. And I said, we can, because when I was in that vehicle with that gun in my car, I didn't know you could get help.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. I thought if I told anyone, I was going to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
They was going to throw the book at me. I didn't know you could go somewhere and actually get help. And so I wanted to create a safe environment that's Christ-centered for people to get help with their addiction.
Well, so how have you seen God move in the life of your church and through this Grace Recovery Home ministry?
Well, um, we went from, because when the church called me back, we were 50, 75 people. Some had left. And then the drugs that I was taking and the amount I was taking, I have heart disease. And so, again, this is early. I was still early in my recovery, and the doctor wanted me to take time off because of the stress level. And I said, well, I'll take some time off. And so I went to the deacons, said I needed to take some time off. And when that happened, rumors got out that I was back on drugs, in which that wasn't the case at all.
Right.
And the church went down to 15 people, and that included kids. So in 2016, we were looking to shut the doors. We had opened the ministry up in 2014, but in 2016, we was looking to shut the doors. We just didn't have the finances to pay the bills. And I said, well, I prayed about it, and God gave me a word, said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And by that fall, we were able to spend, and it's not about money, but it's also, it takes money to do a ministry. We was able to spend $10,000 that fall. Couldn't pay the bills in January, but I was able to spend $10,000 on remodeling fellowship hall. That following year, we was able to open up a women's home. And then once we got that open, a bank called me and said, we have a house we want to give you. So they gave me a 2-story, 6-bedroom house, 5 acres of land, and wrote me a check for $10,000.
My goodness.
for the ministry. And now we have 4 houses here in Kentucky, and we have 1 house in Tennessee that we're trying to help those recover from addiction.
And how many people are you ministering to, Todd, through the recovery ministry, but then also in your church services?
Well, church services, about 200 people right now. Yeah. We were pre-COVID. We was actually talking about building another building. We had over 300 people in here, but we're about around 200 now.
And what percentage of those have been connected to the recovery ministry?
Oh, I'd say 85%.
Is that right? Wow, that's got to be an exciting worship service then.
It is. It really is. Yes.
And then through the recovery home, the Grace Recovery Home, how many people are? And it's residential. So how many people are at most times are being housed through that ministry?
I'd say, because it's always varies, because you got in and out graduation thing. I'd say 85 to 100.
Oh wow! So you must have several employees that work with you, and this has grown into quite a ministry.
It has grown into quite a ministry, and actually, I don't. The staff that I have are very dedicated, because the majority of the staff are graduates from our ministry.
Okay, yeah.
And so we have about 10 people on staff.
Yeah. So you never envisioned any of that when you just came back to start pastoring, and you didn't see all that happening probably the way it is now. So there are a lot of pastors, Todd, that do recovery ministry, and others that are interested in it. What advice do you have for pastors that are thinking about starting this ministry? I think you have about 5 things you could share. So what's the first one? First piece of advice?
The first one is prayer. Pray.
Pray. Then when you get tired of praying, pray some more.
Pray some more, because if you feel led to do this, you better make sure you're being led to do this.
Yeah. So bathe it in prayer. Incredibly challenging, incredibly fruitful, but the challenges are also very, very real, along with the fruit.
Oh, very, very real, and I could share stories on that. But
all right. So along with prayer, what else would you list?
I would say educate yourself.
Okay.
Addiction you know, especially in the church, we want to label it, and rightly so. It's a behavior that leads to sin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you have to understand that when a person becomes addicted on any type of substance, their brain has been hijacked,
Mm-hmm.
and so their brain is healing. And so we when we have people come in, we tell them don't make a decision for this first year. Um, Talk it through with somebody because you can't make good decisions
Mm-hmm.
because your brain has been altered and it needs to heal. So educate yourself
Yeah.
on how to deal with the and what's going on with them.
Yeah.
You know, they come in and they're on an emotional roller coaster ride. And the reason is they're having feelings that they haven't felt in a long time because they've been suppressing that with the drug or alcohol. And now they're on this. I mean, you could have somebody you're ministering to, and they just fly off the handle.
Yeah.
You can't fly off with them. You have to talk them down and talk them off that ledge, and try to rational with them.
All right. So pray, educate yourself. What else?
Thoroughly understand and be familiar with uh, the armor of God.
Okay. Spiritual warfare.
It's spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
You'll be attacked in ways you never thought was even was even out there.
Because you're trying to help people trust Christ and be saved, but also pull them out of this addiction, this stronghold, which is going to impact the lives of other people.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and you will get attacked.
Yeah.
I mean, it's spiritually. I'm talking about not. If I was being attacked physically, I can handle that. I grew up, in the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But spiritually, it's hard, and you have to stay prayed up. You have to have that whole armor on. You got to have your mind right, your heart right, your feet right. You got to make sure you're in the Word, just to because there's so many challenges. It's just unbelievable.
What else would you add, Todd, for that advice for that
I
pastor?
would, I would say research other ministries.
Okay.
That are doing similar things, and then once you research it, prepare your congregation
Yep.
because you're having a totally different population
Yeah.
that's going to be there. You may come in, set your purse down in the pew, and go visit with somebody. You might not want to do that.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared that people's going to come in and they may have their hat on.
Yeah.
They may not. I've got people don't know how. They've never been to church.
Yeah. Sure.
And so you have to prepare your congregation not to be judgmental, not to. These are people that don't know.
Yep.
And one of the things that we do is, I'd say 70% of the people that come in here don't even know how to look up a Bible verse
Yeah.
in the Bible, and we have to teach them how to do that.
So Todd, how long did it take for the church to get comfortable with the ministry that has become your all's ministry? Because I'm thinking if you're dealing with folks in addiction, in recovery, they may relapse multiple times before they see real life change and progress, and that's hard for believers. When you see someone profess faith in Jesus, get baptized, you kind of hope they're on a growing trajectory from that point. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, it's not. It's not always the case, and and sometimes you've got to let the people get some more pain,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to let them experience their story. Whatever that is. I have mine, but you really have to prepare the congregation that those things will happen. Not every person that comes in here is going to be a success story, but one of the things we got to remind ourselves as a staff is that we planted a seed.
Yeah.
And there's been, we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary next year. And we have had people that's been here, didn't make it through our program, relapsed, went back out, and then see them a few years later and they're like, I want to thank you for what you've done. That always stuck with me. And they'll say a church service or just as a whole, and you could see they got a smile on their face, their family's back, and they look healthy. So
That's
we're
exciting.
we're always planting a seed.
Todd, talk to that man or woman right now who may have come across this interview and they're currently in the throes of addiction. They're struggling. They hate it. They're ashamed. They're embarrassed. Maybe nobody else really knows. What would you say to that person right now?
Well, I would say don't let the shame defeat you right now. Um, you know, the Bible says that take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, and then the obedience will speak for itself. That the shame that we have today, uh, we can be overcomers, and it's a process though. It won't happen overnight. And you may not get that warm, fuzzy feeling, but if you work that process every day, stay committed every day, one day at a time, and you'll start seeing miracles. I tell you, I've seen so many miracles just in my life and other people's lives that it's just amazing what God can do when somebody surrenders. And that's the key. Surrender. That's the key to life. Surrender. If you surrender, you'll be able to be successful.
Todd, could you tell us about one of those stories where you've seen God really change a life through the gospel?
I wish I had time to tell you 100 stories.
Yeah.
I've got a young lady, and that I sent some pictures over, and I don't think y'all got them up, but anyway, you've got them, and just for you, if you want to review them, it's a before and after.
Uh-huh.
This young lady probably weighed 80 pounds soaking wet,
Wow.
had 2 children, had lost every tooth in her mouth, tooth in her head, just, wide open, wild, just acted like a wild animal. And she came into our program, and we sit down, and she said, I need a change. I don't know how to change. I don't know how to do anything. I said, you don't do anything. Just sit there and let us help you. And she did. And she's given herself. She sits in church, Todd, and it's amazing. I'll watch her, and I'll just read the Bible, and she'll start crying.
My goodness.
It's just so powerful to her that where she was and where she's at now, and she's on my staff today. We've helped her. She's got teeth. She's got a beautiful smile. She's my court liaison. She goes to court.
Wow.
And represents Grace today. And she's sitting in front of judges that was putting her in jail. And now she's sitting in front of them, and they ask her for her assistance and her help on different situations and stuff. And it's just amazing.
Todd, what a great story of redemption. When you're telling that story, I couldn't help but think about Jesus and the Gadarene demoniac that, here's this guy out of his mind, not clothed, hurting himself. And he wanted to go with Jesus after he was relieved and saved, but Jesus sent him back to his own people. And that's exactly what she's doing. She's back with the people who watched her destructive life, and now she's just bearing witness to the hope of Christ.
Absolutely. And like I said, I wish I could tell you 100. I wish we had time for me to tell you 100 stories.
Yeah.
Because it's phenomenal to see. And I'll say this. I know we're live and all this, and this may need to be said. One of the people that I have on staff, when he came in, he's a homosexual. And he was like, well, I need help, but I don't want to come to a faith base because I'm gay. I said, I'm here to help you with your addiction. We'll deal with the others later. Because how am I going to share the gospel with people if I'm turning them away?
Right.
And he came, he went through the program, he fell in love with the Lord, got saved, has turned his life around, and now he is one of the peer support specialists that I've mentioned. He's one of the peer support specialists. He's a house director. He's my public relations guy. He's back. He's in college again. He just won an award here in the community at the chamber for ambassador of the year for the chamber. And I wish I had time to tell you his whole story. Just phenomenal how God can turn people around.
And even, I mean, I'm assuming the rest of the story, even he's addressed the homosexuality.
Yes, yes, absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Well, praise the Lord for your ministry. I'm grateful to get to hear it. Would love to hear more. This platform is called Leadership Lessons. Todd, can you tell us about an experience in your life that has impacted the way that you view leadership?
Yeah, let me just say one more thing for the preacher that's looking to remember. This is a dirty ministry.
Yeah.
This is not nothing. This is dirty. You got to get your hands dirty. In 2016, when we was getting ready to shut the door, and this is a principle that I've been using ever since then, is God said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. That's the word I got. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Matthew 6 says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And so from that point forward, I've always done what I can do, and I let God do the rest. I let him deal with the outcome. For an example, just this year, I was having some challenges from some people who were coming against the home that was actually affecting people coming in. And we talked about it as a staff and things, and I was very frustrated, and I done tried everything, wrote letters, blah, blah, blah. And finally, God led me to preach on prayer the first of the year. So I preached on prayer. And I said, well, I guess I need to practice what I'm preaching. So I began to lift this situation up in prayer. And all of those people are not in that position anymore of where they're hindering us any longer. So go ahead.
No, God just showed you that you need to bring these things to him. He's able to open the doors and take care of the ministry.
Absolutely. And I think as a leader, you know, my primary thing is making the people around me better.
Yeah.
I invest in people. Yeah. The people that I have work here, if they could tell you stories, and I invest in them, not only spiritually, financially, and everything. I want their lives to be better. And that's anybody I come in contact with. But one of the things that I think as a leader, sometimes we forget, we try to be that leader and carry that burden by ourselves so much that we forget that, you know, the story told about the little boy was sitting in the father's lap, and the dad said, son, you can do anything you want to do in life. He said, you can do anything you want to do. And the little boy jumped out of his lap, went over to this big rock and tried to pick this big rock up. And he started crying and says, Daddy, I can't do it. And his dad said, yes, you can. And the boy tried again. He said, I can't do it, Daddy. And his daddy said, yes, you can. Try one more time. And the boy went and picked to grab it. And all of a sudden, the rock began to come up. And the dad was behind the little boy picking the rock up. Yeah. And the dad said, as long as I'm with you, son, and you call on me, you can do whatever. And that's the way it is with God.
That's our Heavenly Father.
That's right. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens.
Todd, thank you. If folks want to know more about you or Grace Recovery Home Ministry, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, our phone number is 270-847-4216. 270-847-4216. We also have a website, webpage called gracerecoveryhome.org. They can definitely go there, call us, or they can check us out on Facebook. Grace Recovery Home, just do a search on that and we'll come up.
Brother, thank you for your ministry. Thank you for what God's doing through your life and you being available to him and just using your own challenges. He's redeemed, it looks like, your life, Todd, and is working through you for the good of others. And we appreciate you and really appreciate you joining Leadership Lessons.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And like I said, families, just love your loved ones. Yeah. Get them the help they need as soon as you can.
Well, thank you, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you.